Good afternoon, everyone. It's Pablo.zuanic, cannabis analyst at Zuanic Associates. Thank you for joining us and wishing everybody a meaningful Juneteenth today. We have a panel today to discuss the legalization of adult use cannabis in Pennsylvania. And we're very happy to have our three speakers on this panel, Senator Sharif Street, Senator Danny Laughlin, and Representative Eamon Brown. Welcome to all of you. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks.
Look, we're going to start with just an introduction for each one of you. I'll start with you, Senator Street. If you can tell us, how long have you been in office, the district that you represent, your interest in cannabis reform, and how the subject of cannabis reform falls in your district. I'll start with you, Senator Street. Thank you. Quick introduction.
Well, look, I've been involved with cannabis since I got to the legislature. But it's an issue I paid attention to. My uncle, who served in the legislature back in the 80s, had a cannabis bill even back then for cannabis legalization. So this is not a new topic for me. Look, I will say the issue, as far as I can tell, polls extremely highly in my district, as it does in most districts across the Commonwealth. I'm interested. I got involved in it primarily as a legislator because I was concerned about some of the social justice concerns. Although cannabis usage for folks who are Black and white, Asian and Latino was all equal, Black and brown folks were 4 to 5 times more likely to have a law enforcement encounter because of cannabis usage. But when I began to look at the issue, I realized that we were wasting law enforcement resources. We were leaving tax resources on the table, and that we could more safely govern have cannabis usage take place if there was testing and labeling and regulation to keep it out of the hands of kids. So the reality is, I think that legalization of adult use cannabis will make it less likely it'll be in the hands of kids, more revenue, and we can move towards a more equitable system where we expunge or seal the records of all those who've had cannabis convictions as we move forward. So that's a basic overview of my involvement.
Great, thank you. And thank you for joining us again. Senator Laughlin, go ahead, please.
I'm glad to be here. I come from almost a 180 view from where Senator Street is, as far as how I got to be the co-sponsor on this bill. I had some trouble getting my oldest son through high school because of his cannabis use. And I actually came at this problem from a perspective that I was not a fan of cannabis. And after I got to researching it, and talking to Senator Street, I realized that regulating it and trying to keep it out of the black market was a much better approach for trying to keep it out of the hands of children. And it's so I come at this from kind of an unlikely standpoint, I guess. And yet, after a few years of working on this, Senator Street and I think are pretty well aligned on what the goals of this bill are, some of the social equity issues that he has made me aware of, some of the teen use issues that I've made him aware of, and I think we complement each other pretty well on kind of the 1-2 punch to try and get this moved.
And can I ask you, Senator Laughlin, how does cannabis fall in your district specifically?
It's about a 75-25 issue.
Okay, thank you. Representative Brown, go ahead.
Yeah, so first and foremost, thank you for having me on this panel. I agree with everything both the senators said, especially Senator Street. We share those same reasons why we're in. But for me, on top of that, it was a personal issue for many folks in my family. I had a personal run-in with cannabis, which almost ruined my life. And then I know dozens, or if not dozens, hundreds of folks who this prohibition has impacted their life, whether it was due to this reason they can't get access to housing, they can't get a job, and they're couch surfing. They can't live with their mother if their mother is in some kind of government assisted program because they have a cannabis conviction. So I'm in this to get this done, to get to get the access to good government to all of Pennsylvanians. And, running with cannabis or the cannabis situation should not be the barrier for you to live a prosperous life.
Understood.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. So look, to those of you listening and on Twitter, we are looking at your questions, right? We're also getting questions by email. We also get questions here on the Zoom chat. So we're very attentive to the questions that the public may have. But I'll start again here with the Q&A. Senator Street, I'll start with you first. Please describe in detail the key components of Senate Bill 846, which is a bipartisan bill, of course. And just give us the details. When will adult sales start? How many dispensaries, taxes, other key pieces of this bill? Thank you.
Well, look, when it will start depends on when we pass it. And so I think Dan and I'd love to have it start real soon. But we've got to make sure if you get 26 of our colleagues prepared to vote for the bill, we've got to get a House Democratic majority and a Senate Republican majority ready to move the same bill. That's where Representative Brown comes in. We've got to make sure, and so there are a number of legislators, we've got to make sure the governor is on board, and he appears to be largely aligned with us. But all those things have to line up in order for us to get a bill on the governor's desk and it to be legal. And I think we're getting closer than we've ever been. But folks need to understand we're not quite done getting this done. I think that there will be some changes in the process. But as we currently configure the bill, what we're looking at is the bill will seal and expunge the records of everyone who's had a cannabis conviction. And seal we can do legislatively and make available expungements. It will create it will give an opportunity for people who are already in the medical space to buy their way into the adult use space, and there will be some additional licenses. It creates a cannabis control board to oversee the cannabis, the whole cannabis industry in Pennsylvania, both medical and recreational. It creates some social equity licenses that will be targeted towards cannabis industries most impacted by war cannabis, and it creates some micro licenses to make sure that small farmers and other folks can get involved and get in the game. I think that's a general overview of the bill, and I'm certainly willing to let Senator Laughlin, Representative Brown chime in.
Yeah, no, that's good. Before I let me just stay with you for 1 second. And I understand it's not a final bill, but in terms of 846, there could be changes to it. But how long did it take to pull the bill together, and what were the main points of contention until now?
Well, look, we've been working on it for a couple of years. This is a sort of an extension of the last session. The bills get a new number each session. I think this session, it didn't take us that long because we have been working on it in previous sessions. But I think Dan and I have been working on this together for a couple of years now, so we're not new to doing this. In terms of what are some of the points of contention, I don't know if there are points of contention or points of sort of educating one another. I came at it concerned about some of the social equity issues, and Dan came at it concerned about keeping it out of the hands of kids. Ultimately, I thought keeping it out of the hands of kids was good, and Dan was for addressing social equity. So I don't think they were contentions. It's just we had different priorities, but I think his priorities made the bill stronger, and I hope that he feels the same about mine. That's
good. Thank you. And just one more for you. There's been some discussion around a state store model in the Commonwealth. Is that a viable option to pass through the Senate, in your opinion?
No, it is not a viable option. We're not looking at the state store model. Could the state stores have some role in some way, possibly, but we're not looking at a state store model. We're looking at a market model where this goes through the market, and there's a cannabis control board that's separate and that would regulate it. But no, we're not looking at running it through the liquor control board.
Understood. Thank you. So, Senator Laughlin, in terms of Bill 846, how would you describe the support from other Republican senators for the bill, and remind us of how the PA Senate splits between Republicans and Democrats in terms of numbers? Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, a lot of the work that both Sharif and I do on this bill are basically private meetings that we have with our fellow senators to try and build support for this bill, and it works the same way with every bill. but everybody's district is different, and they all come at these issues, with a slightly different point of view. I've been advocating for this for almost 3 years now, and I will say that in that time, the attitudes amongst the Senate Republicans has certainly softened from when I first helped introduce this bill. I have what I would refer to as quiet support, where if we put it up for a floor vote, I think our side could provide enough votes to get to 26. But people are concerned about putting their name on it right now. It's still a little bit of a hot topic for some of these more rural districts. So we still have work to do as far as building support for it. I will also add that I think that the work that Senator Street and I have done together on this bill has opened a lot of eyes in the Senate as far as politically. It's becoming more and more popular to push for adult use legalization. And one of the talking points that I use, quite frankly, with some of our more conservative members, is that we've already legalized cannabis in Pennsylvania through the medical program. And one of these days, I know I'm going to get in trouble for continuing to say it's like joining Sam's Club. But basically, that's what it is. You can buy a medical card or get a medical card prescribed, however you want to look at it, for $50 or $100, and then you can go into a dispensary and buy, pretty much as much cannabis as you want. So from my standpoint, we've already legalized cannabis in Pennsylvania. And Senator Street and I and Senator Representative Brown over in the House are trying to wrap up basically the paperwork to get it legalized, taxed, put into a regulatory environment where a consumer knows that they're buying a safe, legal, clean product. They're not buying it from some shady drug dealer on the street corner. And I think those are all good talking points that both conservatives and liberals can kind of come together on why we should get this done.
But just staying with you, Senator, so in terms of the process, maybe just remind us, where are we in the process? There's a committee markup, committee vote, floor vote. Where are we in that process specifically?
The bill still needs to move out of committee, and that in and of itself, that in and of itself is a process, and it's going to take more. It's going to take some more effort to get it moving, and I would be remiss if I did not say that we are in budget negotiations right now, and this is one of the few revenue generators that isn't a tax increase. So there's certainly some eyes raised on the Republican side when you start talking about revenue without a tax increase. But I will say that, at this point in the juncture of negotiations, I think it would be helpful if the governor himself would pick up the phone and sit down with both the House and Senate leadership team and say, look, I'd like to get this done. What's it going to take?
Understood. And just to be clear, in terms of the budget negotiations, I understand that has to be done by end of June. So there is a bit of a deadline to get this through this year or in this session. Is that correct, Senator Laughlin?
The budget deadline is the end of June. However, it typically runs a week or two into July, so it's not a hard deadline.
Right. And then just staying with you in terms of the pro tempore president of the Senate right now, Senator Ward, Kim Ward, she's been very vocal against this. How does that complicate the process in terms of even being put up, again, for a committee vote or a floor vote in the Senate, in your opinion, Senator Laughlin?
Well, look, the process that needs to be worked through is you need to build enough support that these folks can feel comfortable running the bill. And that's what both Sharif and I are doing in the Senate right now. Once we can get to where there's a comfortable majority, I think we'll be there.
Right. And again, before I move on to Representative Brown, and not to put words in your mouth, Senator Street and Laughlin, it seems what you are saying is that we're not there yet, right? The final version of 846 is not something that has enough votes right now to get through committee and floor vote, or am I wrong in that interpretation?
Well, what I would think what Dan said is that members aren't ready to have a vote. I'm not sure what would happen if we did, but the process, there's two decisions. We can't, this is not like a referendum. We can just force a vote. The leadership has to decide they're ready to have a vote. And I think there's still some discussion that's going to take place before we have a vote. I'd venture to say that there are probably 26 votes for it if we had a vote, but there won't be a vote until leadership is comfortable that they're ready to have a vote.
Right. And in terms of, Senator Laughlin's comment about Governor Shapiro getting more involved, do you share that view? I thought he's given a lot of input into the bill itself, Senator Street.
Look, I think that the governor's done a yeoman's work in terms of putting it in his budget address, but certainly his voice is a powerful one, and any additional support we can get from the governor is welcomed and would definitely help move the process along.
And one more for you, Senator Laughlin. Are there any deal breakers in 846 right now, the way it looks for the bill to get those 26 votes? I mean, it sounds like you're saying they are there, at least in silent, right? But are there any items in 846 that complicate things right now, in your view, that it would help the process if they are taken out? I mean, in your opinion, Senator Laughlin.
Yeah. I think, quite frankly, that Senator Street and I, and some of the industry folks that have helped craft this bill have produced a product that is pretty thorough. And I think we have already taken out many of the stumbling blocks that would be a deal breaker for anybody. There's just some folks that, philosophically are opposed to this. And I don't believe that's going to change on some of those. I'm not going to call them out by name. They're friends of mine, but there are folks that are just philosophically opposed to this. But they're a small minority, and I think as we continue to build support for this, and people become more open about talking about it, I think we'll get there. I think Senator Street is right. The governor certainly carries a lot of weight in Pennsylvania, and if we could get him to be a little bit more active in the negotiation process, that would be helpful. But I also think that if we don't get this done this year, I feel pretty strongly that next session we will get there. The public opinion on cannabis has changed drastically just in the last 8 years that I've been in the Senate.
Yeah, no, certainly. I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but Representative Brown, in terms of House Bill 2210, is that a mirror version of 846, or are there some differences?
No, absolutely a mirrored version.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's a companion piece.
Understood. Now, I've heard that there are other bills in the House going through that are competing with 2210, or is 2210 the only one?
Nah, so one of my colleagues, well, two of my colleagues, they introduced House Bill 2500, but reading through it with myself and some of my team, we don't really see too many differences. But that's we should be focusing on that now that people are showing more public interest. You have another Democratic House member, and then you have a Republican as a co-sponsor on 2500. What they're showing is that the interest is growing, the support is growing. I have about two co-sponsors on HB 2210 that are Republicans, and now you have another Republican, and I don't know how many signed on to HB 2500, but what we're seeing is that the support is growing. These are all good signs, and like I said, I really don't see a big difference, but what I do see is the parameters are being set, right? The bills are that much similar that it is clear of the direction that we're going in. And when it comes to 2500 or 2210, we see the path forward. We're going to have some people who might not agree on everything. A couple of us on there sit on the Black Caucus with Chairman Nelson, and there are some things that they would like to see. that are not in there at this moment. So eventually once we get to a committee vote, hopefully we can agree to amendments or changes between Senator Laughlin and Senator Street. Then we'll potentially put in what the Black Caucus is looking for.
Right, just a couple of things there. So in terms of 2500, are there a couple of things on 2500 that you would have to incorporate into 2210 to get it through a vote in the
no, so they,
House, in your opinion?
yeah, so they're that much alike.
Okay.
Like I said, I'm excited that we got this conversation started and we got more people wanting to introduce bills on cannabis. It's just showing that the need is there. It's from two state reps on a complete other side of the Commonwealth. You know, and they just dropped theirs a few days ago. We're still going through it, but at this current moment, there's not really much changes. And like I said, the parameters are being set.
Right.
And
again,
we see what people are looking for.
Understood. And I know you say 2210 is a mirror bill of the Senate bill, but and at the beginning of your introduction, you said what were your priorities, but just expand in terms of you know, what are the key features that you need to be in the final bill, in your opinion, from your perspective?
Yeah. So the social equity component, the expungement, and I said earlier for those reasons, you know, the decrim, and just making sure the communities that were impacted the most by the prohibition, whether it was taking fathers out of homes or prohibiting access to government, we need to dump some of the tax revenue into those communities to make them whole again. And then with the social equity licenses, we need to make sure that folks who were impacted actually, well, the folks who look like myself actually have a seat at the table and they actually are profiting and benefiting and being able to employ folks in the communities that were impacted all from the prohibition.
Understood. And then just staying with you, Representative Brown, so can you talk about the process in the House? I suppose it's similar to the Senate, but there has to be a markup, go through a committee vote, floor vote. Where are we in that process right now?
Yeah, so where we are right now is in the House. We're trying to refer, the bill is currently, it was referred to Health Committee. We are very interested in getting it referred to Judiciary Committee. We feel like that's where it belongs due to the decrim and some of the other components. Some folks are having conversations with the chairman of the Judiciary. I'm hearing that they've been going well, but we'll feel a lot more comfortable with it in Judiciary so we can get it moving forward faster. The current chairman in Health, he has his own, he's been fishing out ideas and allegedly working on something, but we haven't seen it yet. But we know the vehicle should be, whether it's 2210, HB 46, this should be the vehicle. Senator Laughlin, Senator Street, they've been going at this for a very long time. They were, since I've been elected, the first bipartisan co-sponsors of the legalization, the UA legalization. And I think that we should get it done with their names on it. They started this conversation. And I'm just excited to be working along with them to get it done in the House. But so we get it, if it gets referred to Judiciary, of course, we're going to have to, we have the majority on my side in the Democratic majority House right now. And we do have a lot of Republicans is polling high in their areas, and they're starting to wake up and understand that, you know what, the time might be now to get it done. You know, so that's where we are. We're stuck in a committee where it shouldn't be right now.
Right. So again, I don't want to put words in your mouth here to the three of you, but it sounds like we are closer than ever before. It's bicameral. There's more agreement than before. So we're closer, but it sounds to me like not close enough to get it done in time. But again, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. Senator Street, maybe you can expand on that. In terms of likelihood that this gets done on time, I think there's still a lot of issues to be addressed before we get this done. But again, go on, please, Senator Street.
So I think one thing that's important to point out here is we don't have to get it done by the end of the fiscal year. We needed to get it done by the end of the legislative calendar. So the legislative calendar takes us all the way through the end of November. The fiscal year is in June, but the legislation could get done in the summer or the fall We'd love to get it done before the budget, but we don't have to recycle new bills until the end of the legislative calendar, which goes all the way through the end of November. So I think I'm still cautiously optimistic that given where we are, we've got a decent shot of getting it done during this legislative session.
Right. And if for some reason, and if we were not to get it done in this session until end of November, then what? We have to start again next year and wait until November 2025? Or?
No, we would just reintroduce it in January with again new bill numbers, but it would be the same legislation just with new bill numbers. And the committee assignments might be a little different. The makeup of the General Assembly tends not to turn over too dramatically.
Right.
So I think we still get.
And again, we want to get into more details here, but Senator Laughlin, and I'm not asking you to make predictions here, but how do you feel? I don't know if in terms of probability that we get a compromise bill by end of November, in your opinion.
Well,
what has to happen for us to get there in terms of
right.
a compromise bill, in your opinion? Yeah, thank you.
Right. Look, I think the fact that that this is a bipartisan bill obviously carries some weight. We have a little ways to go, but I will say that as we move through this both legislative year and political season, I think as people start to see the poll numbers in their own districts of how popular this is, and they realize that it's not the kiss of death politically, even in a conservative district, that starts to move the opinion meter, so to speak. Senator Street is well versed in this as well, and quite frankly, as I guess the first Republican to co-sponsor a cannabis bill in Pennsylvania, I can tell you that it has actually helped with my popularity. I've irritated a few people with that, but it has certainly been politically expedient for me to be the co-sponsor, and I am continuing to point this out to my side of the aisle. This is not 20 years ago. This is this is 2024, and there is growing support for it, rapidly growing support for this, and I think people are starting to take notice. So I'm hopeful that we will, at a minimum, get close this year, and if not, we'll certainly expedite the process next legislative session because we already have the bill written. We can introduce it again, basically on day one.
Right. But just to stay with you there, when you said, still ways to go, right? Can you expand a little bit on that? I mean, just a bit more color in terms of what are the key issues in that ways to go?
We just need to build more support for it. That's all. As soon as there's basically a plurality of folks that want this bill to move, we'll have a good shot at moving it. And, that might be later in the year. Yeah.
Okay. Understood.
Yeah, I would agree with Dan. Look, I think it's just a question of us just talking to colleagues. I think the more people hear about it, the more support there is. I don't know that there's not like, if you're looking for like, there's this one thing that's holding it up. I think it's just people getting comfortable that the public is ready. And I think more and more members are coming on board, and I think we're getting closer and closer every day.
That's good. Thank you. Look, I'm going to take some questions here from the Twitter feed and from the line. So just short answers, whoever wants to answer. It says during the hearings, there has been some tension between MSO advocates and equity advocates. This is quotations from the person asking the question. Is there an obstacle to passing an adult use bill this year? Senator Street, if you want to answer it.
No, I don't think so. I think, look, we're going to hear from all stakeholders. Ultimately, I think we're used to talking to advocates and business people. That's true of most issues. I think we're going to be able, in this one, I think we'll be able to put together a product, and we've got a framework or something that can work for everybody.
All right.
For sure.
Senator Laughlin, another question for you maybe here. Any concerns with Governor Shapiro's proposed 20% state tax rate on cannabis?
Well, I think that's a touch on the high side, to be honest with you, because part of my goal of coming to the table with this is to take a bite out of the black market, and I think if we tax it too high, it'll actually almost help the black market because they have quite frankly, they have a price point advantage on this end. So I think 20% is probably a touch on the high side. I think if it fell in, the 13, 14%, that's probably more reasable.
Thank you. And Representative Brown, questions for you. Go on, Representative Brown.
So I also think 20 is too high. I would like to see it in the low teens, because we want to leave some room for municipalities to actually benefit from the revenue, and then make it more attractive. So when they go through their zoning and things of that nature, they need to be able to gain some revenue as well.
Right. So Representative Brown, 2-3 quick questions for you. One person asking me, I know you mentioned House Bill 2500, but someone is telling me there's 4 or 5 other bills in the House around adult use cannabis. Is that correct, or is it only your bill and 2500, pretty much?
Yeah. So to my knowledge, there's 2 right now that were actually introduced. Several members might be floating the idea, I've been working on this or working on that. The 2 that are actually introduced at this current moment is 2210 and 2500.
And you said that the chairman
in this session,
this
session, yes,
right, in this session, and I think you said the chairman of the Black Caucus is in favor of these 2 bills, or not?
Yeah, he's in favor. We're all in favor of the potential concept. Yes,
Right.
as long as we see some the social equity thing addressed, in which a lot of states have failed. So we have a lot of data and research that we can build off of to create the model for the entire country.
Right. Can I just stay with you on that? And if anyone else wants to expand on the subject, do so. But in terms of social equity, are we talking there about prioritizing licenses for social equity applicants, or are we talking about a part of the tax revenue to be allocated into a fund to help people that have been impacted by the war on drugs? Maybe just expand a little bit in terms of the key issues around social equity, Representative Brown.
Yeah, well, that's 2 of them. That's 2 of the main components.
Right.
We want access. We don't want it to be similar to the medical program, which when the language was done, it was said in the language that minority, but what white women also fell under minority. So we need to make sure that it's Black folks, Black and brown people, who have access and who have a seat at the table and who are going to benefit and profit from this market.
Understood. Senator Street, another quick question to answer. Go on.
Want to point out we want to make sure that Black and brown representation is there. That's not to say that there shouldn't be some WBE requirements in addition to that, but they're not. We want to make sure they're not substituted.
Right. I want to stay on the subject, but Senator Laughlin, a lot of opposition on your side of the aisle on some of these social equity aspects, or not as much as some would think.
I think from my side of the aisle, as long as there's some fairness in the bills, we're going to be comfortable with it. We are well aware that the Black and brown community has taken it on the chin on this cannabis prohibition for literally decades, and we know that there's some space to make up there. So I have not personally heard any of my Senate Republican colleagues complaining about the social equity component of this bill. Zero complaints about that.
Understood. A separate question for anyone here. Any thoughts on home grow? Is that a priority in the bill right now? I've read the bill, but if you can comment on that, Senator Street, in terms of allowing home grow cultivation. That's one question. And the second one, which is related, is the push for decriminalization. If we look at New York, decriminalization has resulted in many illicit, unlicensed stores and bodegas selling cannabis, right? So there's the other side of the decriminalization argument sometimes if it's not enforced and monitored. But just a quick answer in terms of your thoughts on home cultivation and on how far decriminalization is taken.
I think we want some form of limited home grow for personal use for medical patients is something that we're all considering. I think I think it will be a positive thing. But in terms of decrim, we want a legalized recreational adult use model, and we've seen the mistakes of other states. And like Representative Brown has pointed out, we want to get it right in the way we do it. So we're not looking for a free for all where everybody does whatever they want. We're looking for a legalized market where we can have some regulations, testing, keep it out of the hands of kids and protect folks while we collect revenue and make sure we're targeting towards communities that have been disproportionately impacted in the past.
Another question on the assumption that the legislation fails, is going through the ballot an option in the Commonwealth? Like we're seeing.
No.
There's no such thing in Pennsylvania.
Okay, understood. And then in terms of hemp derivatives, some states like Florida, the governor there is supportive of hemp derivatives, right? THCO, Delta 8, Delta 9. Any views in terms of whether that should be part of this discussion, or that's a whole separate subject here?
Well, I view it as a separate subject. I'm not sure where Senator Street or Representative Brown are. I think our bill's pretty comprehensive on what we're trying to do already.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Just moving on, maybe I'll start with you, Senator Street. Can we quantify, when you're making the argument and the case for legislation, quantify the economic benefits, whether it's in terms of taxes, jobs, how it helps the economy? And also, there's some tax revenue being lost to neighboring states like Maryland and New Jersey, and potentially now to Ohio. But go on, sorry.
Look, revenue estimates have been anywhere from 200 million, which is one of the more conservative estimates I think the governor's using, all the way up to the previous Auditor General had an estimate of close to $1 billion. But whether it's 200 million or it's $1 billion, all that's a lot of money that we didn't have to tax Pennsylvanians to get. And so I think it makes good sense.
What about the idea that neighboring states legalizing that may take jobs away and tax revenue away from the Commonwealth? Is that also a factor, or that's not something people are paying so much attention to, in your opinion? Anyone can answer that. Yeah.
Well, I can jump in on that one, Pablo. The district that I represent is bordered by New York and Ohio. It's about either state's about 20 minutes from my house. And I can tell you that people are already traveling to New York and Ohio to buy cannabis. Yeah. Quite frankly, in my district, they drive to Ohio to buy gas because their gas is 50 cents a gallon cheaper. So they already have a reason to be over there. And we are definitely experiencing border bleed in my district in a grand fashion.
Yeah, in my district, they drive to New Jersey.
Yeah, and same here. New Jersey is a stone's throw away. Companies are even bold enough to have billboards all over Center City, South Philly, coming into West Philly with like directions on how to get to a store in New Jersey to buy your cannabis. So they're like, yes, it's legal over here. Come spend your money with us. And people are actually doing it. They have QR codes on these billboards, and scan it and go. Yeah. Takes you right there.
Just a couple of more questions here from the feed, and I'll come back to our flow. But in terms of the November election, the presidential election, and of course Senate, House, and other elections, how does that impact these negotiations in the Senate and the House in the Commonwealth, trying to get the bill done? Does it help, or does it make it more difficult? Senator Street, maybe you can answer.
Well, look, I don't think this what we do with Pennsylvania legalization of cannabis has much to do with the federal elections. I think the fact that we're all running matters, and it's a popular issue. So voting on something popular is helpful in an election year for us. But I don't think that the federal elections have much to do with what we're doing around cannabis legalization.
Understood.
No, and I would add that quite frankly, if they would reschedule it on the federal level, it would make it a little bit easier for Senator Street and I to get this done and out of the Senate too. because I have heard that as one of our stumbling blocks. Now, now that you mention it, look, we're inching towards the election, and I think as elections go, everybody worries about what votes they're putting up. So we'll see. And obviously, more support for this from the general public will help other folks get there.
Yeah, understood.
It's an easy decision to make whether you're Democrat or Republican. You're talking about roughly 40,000 jobs being created, minimum of $250 million in taxes a year, revenue, and at least $1 billion in infrastructure. So, $1 billion in infrastructure spend. It's like, what else are we talking about? It's time to get it done. This is the year to get it done. This is the team to get it done. Let's just, stop playing with it.
Representative Brown, I'm going to stay with you there. Just moving on to the subject of the medical program, right? How, once we have adult use legislation and that's approved, how do you protect the existing medical program? How are patients protected? And any thoughts on that?
That's probably a question for Senator Street or Senator Laughlin to answer, because I wasn't around for the standing up of the medical.
Look, I think our bill, we've talked to medical providers. I think our bill makes the right provisions by giving them a chance to buy into the recreational program, but it actually could solve some of their challenges by moving it to a cannabis control board that be at least part staffed by the agriculture department. I think it makes it, we could, and if we do this right, we can enhance our medical program and not hurt it.
Yeah. And again, the medical program in Pennsylvania, we consider quite successful, right? It's about 3 times the sales that you see in Ohio, despite, similar populations. So just moving on in terms of questions here again from the feed for you, Senator Laughlin. I know we touched on it, but a lot of people asking me the same question about Senator Ward, that as long as she's pro tempore president of the Senate, there's no way that this can get done. Maybe you can correct that assumption that people are making when they ask that question. Well,
look, I need to be mindful that I'm not speaking on her behalf. I think everybody on this call understands that. I can tell you without fear of upsetting Senator Ward that she is not philosophically opposed to this. This is more of a caucus-wide issue. As one of our leaders, she has to keep an eye out for everybody's district, what the election cycle is going to look like, and who a major bill like this helps or hurts. So she's looking at it through a political lens. I've talked to her about the descheduling on the federal level. She feels that would make that a much easier process for her to be comfortable with this bill.
Yeah, and I'll say this. Look, I've talked to Senator Ward. I know she's a Republican member and pro tem, but we're both in the Senate, and I think, look, she's a pragmatic person, and she's going to do what she thinks is in the best interest of the Commonwealth and her members. But I don't think she is an ideologue in the way that would be obstructionist without a reason.
Yeah. I think Senator Street has a pretty accurate view of how this is going right there.
That's great to hear. Senator Street, just in terms of Bill 846, what can you say about the current licensees, what we call the medical incumbents, right? Some states like New York block them from entering the adult use program at the beginning, or they charge very high levies. On the other hand, other states like Ohio allow them from the start. How are you going to handle the topic of the medical incumbents, how they transition, operators, how they transition to the adult program?
We plan on giving, first of all, we thank them for wanting to do business in the Commonwealth and the program they're running. We intend to give them an opportunity to buy into the adult use program. And we believe that they'll help us get it off the ground. We don't want to harm their current business. We just want to expand the opportunities for everyone.
Right. Thank you. Senator Laughlin, 2 questions related, someone is saying to me, divided government has never passed adult use legislation in any U.S. state. I have to go back and check if that's correct, but in some cases it's been ballot or it's been governor and legislation getting together. But we saw in the case of Virginia, right? Democrats control the Senate and the House there, and then the governor vetoed the bill. So the question is really, in Pennsylvania, we have somewhat divided government in the sense that Republicans control the Senate, Democrats control the House, Democratic governor. Divided government has never passed an AU bill. Why is PA different? That's one question. Any thoughts on that?
Look, I am well aware that that adult use is a more popular bill on the Democratic side of the aisle for sure. I will tell you that I've as someone who's up for re-election this year in a somewhat targeted seat, I feel confident that Pennsylvania is going to have a divided government again next year. And I, quite frankly, I like to be someone who's a leader in spaces like this. And I think that's why Senator Street and I enjoy working together on bills like this. So if it's, if that's true, that there's never been an adult use bill passed by a divided legislature in the whole country, then that's even more reason for us to do it.
Understood. And I'm going to stay with you there. And this is a bit of a political question. I try to be very neutral in everything I ask and do, of course, in my work. There are topics that are very dear to, let's say, Trump supporters or that part of the Republican Party. And they control pretty much the Republican Party right now to that extent. And those topics, sometimes people that may not necessarily agree with those topics are very afraid to fight those topics because of the backlash, right? And I could go through a list of various topics. But given that candidate Trump has not necessarily made strong comments on cannabis like he has done in abortion, right? In the case of abortion, he talked about states' rights. He hasn't made comments on cannabis yet. We believe that he might before the election, maybe as soon as the next debate, we'll see. But would you say that this is one of those topics that people are afraid to tackle because of the Trump stance? I could say that he doesn't have a stance public yet, so there's less fear to take it on. Any quick thoughts on that, Senator Laughlin?
Honestly, as far as legalizing adult use in Pennsylvania, I know that Trump is a little bit of a divisive figure. I think would be an accurate way to say it. But quite frankly, as far as this particular topic, I have not gotten really hardly any pushback from what you would call, a true Trump supporter. I mean, I've had a couple for sure. But quite frankly, when we discuss this particular issue with some of my further right constituents, I present this as just a freedom issue. You should be allowed to do what you want as an adult in Pennsylvania, and I think that resonates with them. A lot of the folks on the right side of the aisle are arguably more pro Second Amendment, things like that. And I think from a personal freedom standpoint, this fits very well in there. And then when you sell it to them like that, I think it starts to make more sense to them.
So in that context, I think you were very clear with that answer. So thank you for that. So would you consider yourself an outlier in the Republican Party in terms of the way you think about cannabis, or support for legalization is becoming more the norm among Republicans? I mean, if you can answer that in general, but.
Sure. I consider myself to be a pretty free thinker. And so when I decide to support any particular bill, it's because I think it's the right thing to do for Pennsylvania. It's not because it's the right thing to do for a party. I've taken other stances that aren't maybe stereotypical for a Republican, but quite frankly, my district seems to appreciate that. And I'm going to continue to do that.
Understood. And Senator Street, I mean, Senator Laughlin brought up the subject of rescheduling, the idea that if we move from 1 to 3, it might even make it easier, right, to have these discussions in the future. Any quick thoughts in terms of the actions that President Biden is taking around cannabis in general, pardons and expungements at the federal level, and having started the rescheduling review? Does that make your job easier in trying to get this to get support from Democrats for this bill, in your opinion, Senator Street?
Look, I think the question was, what does it take to get Democrats on board? I think Democrats are prepared to get on board. We just want a product that's going to work. I think that the social equity concerns are real, and I think that making sure that we have access and fairness for everyone. I think we do. I think the issues around making sure that it's not in the hands of kids are matter to Democrats and Republicans alike. So I think we're close. I don't think there is a do or die issue, other than I do think that we want a market-based system in the Senate. I think that's Republicans and Democrats. And I think we want a system where we can make sure that there is an opportunity to make sure that disadvantaged communities can benefit, and that it's out of the hands of kids. I think, and of course, the Commonwealth, we're going to do this, and revenue might not be the driving factor, but if we're going to do this, we do want to collect revenue, and we want to make sure we get rid of the black market. I think those are Democratic priorities. And on this issue, ultimately, I think Republicans aren't as far apart from us on this issue as others. I think this can be an issue that brings us together. We can do something that makes the people of Pennsylvania proud, regardless of party.
Right. And just staying with you, how likely, in your opinion, are Democrats to take the PA Senate this November? It's a question coming through.
Look, I think that's a tough one, but I think each and every day we're going to work hard at it. I'll tell you though, Dan's making it much harder.
Right. Look, I'm going to ask a question. A question for Senator Brown, Representative Brown. I think you mentioned that you've studied the social equity programs in other states. Lessons learned, what has worked, what hasn't worked. I think I don't know if it was you or Senator Street that talked about that you want the social equity program in Pennsylvania to be a model for the rest of the country. Just talk about, in your opinion, what you see that has worked and has not worked in other states, in your opinion. Representative Brown, I'll start with you.
Yeah. So I want to walk into a dispensary and know that it's actually African American owned, right? I want to go to meetings with people in the industry that look like me, not ones that just don't look like me. Like I said, we want to benefit just like everybody else. You mentioned earlier, or I think Senator Laughlin mentioned earlier, we've been taking it on the chin for a very long time. So we need to be in the game, fully in the game. And I think, like I said, with this vehicle, 2210 SB 846, we're headed in the right direction. The governor has made it clear that he wants to get something done. I'm hoping that he gets fully in the game. We have he likes to say GSD. I believe this is something that he wants to get done this year. So it's that simple. We want to benefit and profit just like everybody else.
Senator Street, you want to add to that? Any in terms of lessons learned from other states, things that you think have worked or have not worked in terms of social equity?
I think in terms of social equity, we've looked at some states where they made it too restrictive, and the barriers are too hard for people to get in, and that was a problem. And in some places, the licenses were made available to everyone, and people paid money for social equity licenses and then lost their shirts. So you got to figure out a sweet spot where where you can have regulations that make sense and allow industry to grow, but still allow for opportunity. So I think there's a balance. And that's why we looked at the Cannabis Control Board. So if we need to make adjustments to cannabis size, it doesn't have to come back before the General Assembly each and every time there are adjustments that need to be made. The other thing is, one of the things you do know is that by expunging or sealing the records of everyone, it allows economic benefits to come in a lot of ways. Some of the things that Representative Brown talked about in the beginning, where people's lives are impacted, who may not even be in the cannabis industry, but just had a cannabis conviction. There's a benefit to those folks just having their records sealed and expunged. And that is not to say we don't want people to participate, because we do. We want people to own, we want people to grow, we want people to be Black and brown folks to be in the complete supply chain. But sealing and expunging the records for everyone disproportionately helps Black and brown folks. Even though it helps everybody, including a lot of poor white folks who got convictions too. but because more black and brown people are more disproportionately subject to law enforcement, they're going to be helped disproportionately. The final thing I'll say is, look, by removing some barriers and opening up the market to everyone, and being intentional about helping black and brown folks, invariably these programs end up creating additional access for everyone. And we want to make sure that small businesses, small Pennsylvania farmers, even if they're white folks, can get involved as well. We don't want this to just be the big MSOs, but we certainly welcome their participation as well.
Right.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention this earlier to that answer, but the biggest hurdle that we see have been failing in other states is the access to capital for black and brown companies. So that's the priority here, making sure they have access to capital so they can be a player in this game.
Right.
I agree.
Go on.
I was gonna say I agree. Access to capital is a big issue, and some of the social equity grants are one way to potentially address that.
Look, I'm going to ask you a question here in terms of the social equity, and it's coming from a, call it from a neutral background, right, on the subject matter, and of course very conscientious of the effect of the war on drugs on certain groups of people. But let's say I'm someone that was in jail, right, for dealing drugs, and now so I was impacted by the war on drugs. But maybe I don't necessarily want to start a dispensary, right? Maybe the idea of having to get capital and compete with other companies, perhaps, I want to be helped, or the retribution from the impact of the war on drugs, call it a GI Bill, and I may want to use that money for, I don't know, going to college or doing other things, right? So if you had to choose between, when we say social equity, giving priority licenses to social equity applicants versus taking a part of the tax revenue and giving it like a form of GI Bill to the people that were impacted by the war on drugs, if you had to choose between one of those two, what would you prefer, Senator Street?
Well, look, I don't think we have to choose. We talked about social equity grants to go into those communities. I think there's a way to do some of that, and also make licenses available as well. There's always a question of how much, to what extent, and I think that's going to be a balancing act. And we'll look at those are decisions that may end up being made by a cannabis control board, and are certainly part of the negotiations. But I think there's space for us to do both.
Right. I'm going to just thank you. And look, I'm going to just read some quick questions here. Someone asking me, Governor Shapiro included adult revenue, tax revenue in his 25 budget. That obviously means that he would sign a bill if it's put on his desk, right? I mean, short answer. I'm just reading a question here that came through, but. Senator Laughlin?
If we put a bill on his desk, he'll sign it for sure.
Yeah, that's what we think so, right? That's what.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. I think I'm just going to read here, going through some of the questions that are coming through. Sorry, I'm just okay. I think we're good here. In terms of some of the federal level reform that's being discussed at the federal level, we are discussing rescheduling. There's potential for the safer banking bill to go through. There's also talk of a Garland memo that would provide safe harbor to the industry. So there's a number of things that can happen at the federal level that will help the cannabis industry in general and make it easier for social equity applicants to have access to capital to start their own stores, right? This is an industry start for capital regardless, right? So there are some federal level changes that might make things better for particular applicants. So look, I'm going to, I think that, we are almost on the hour here. We very much appreciate your time. You've been very generous with your time. I think you've been very clear with your answers. I'm going to ask you to make some closing remarks, but if you can, from a Wall Street point of view, people like to think in terms of probability, right? And as you close here, in terms of what people should be focusing on, your thoughts in whether, we have a bill by November that's been approved by the Senate and the House, and obviously signed by Governor Shapiro, and we're starting cannabis sales, adult use, in early 2026. I'll start with you, Senator Street there. So again, closing remarks, but also your prediction in terms of how things may play out, if you can.
Look, I think one, You briefly brought up federal. I think making sure that there is access to cannabis banking would be great. We don't need people driving around in trucks. Making sure that there's rescheduling or descheduling is great. We want to make sure that people can use credit cards and I think that would help with all folks, poor folks, poor white folks, Black folks, Latinos, and even traditional large businesses. We can use traditional capital markets. So that's two. Pennsylvania, I think we will. I'm going to predict ambitiously that we get a bill to the governor's desk by the end of the session. I know it's going to take some work, but I think we can get it done, and I'm going to predict that it happens. And I think that, and in terms of the timing, I think that there'll be sales if we get it on the governor's desk by November. By the beginning of by July of 2025, we'll start seeing recreational adult use sales happening.
Right. Thank you very much. And just one question there, one follow-up for you there. So okay, I'll come back to that. So Senator Laughlin, maybe just closing remarks also on your best prediction about how things play out here. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple things that I think will move the needle there. I think on the federal level, they need to reschedule it. That'll make it easier for us folks in the Pennsylvania Senate. And I said it before, but I'm going to say it again. If we can expect to get this bill moving, it is going to take some actual one-on-one effort out of the governor. I think he needs to sit down and have an actual face-to-face meeting with Senate leadership on both sides of the aisle and say, look, what's it going to take to get this bill to my desk? And I think if they have an open, honest conversation like that, it will expedite the process.
And on that point, and that was going to be my question actually for both of you, Senator Street and Laughlin. So right now, I guess the governor has so much on his plate, and particularly getting the budget done by end of June. So it's probably a lot of negotiation around the budget itself. He may have more time to focus on this in the fall. I mean, or things are not as simple as I'm characterizing them here. Senator Laughlin, any thoughts on that? Or
look, I've seen things move quickly in the Senate when once leadership gets behind something. And I think if the governor truly wants to start booking revenue out of this bill, it's going to take some effort on his part. I say that respectfully. He's a busy guy, but this is a big ticket item for him, and I think he's going to need to schedule a meeting between maybe even both House and Senate leadership. Get everybody in a room, sit around, have a cup of coffee, and have an open, honest discussion about how to get it done. Senator Street and I are doing our part. I can tell you that, and so is Representative Brown. But we're just, we're players on the chessboard right now. But we're not the ones that can make the final decision.
But to be honest, I mean, from my perspective, I thought that Governor Shapiro had already been involved, talking to all of you in this process. Or not, that doesn't sound like he has been that involved from what you're saying, Senator Laughlin.
Well, I'll let Senator Street weigh in on that, but I have not.
Look, let me say this. I think what Senator Laughlin's saying is this. Look, the governor's been involved. He said when he's come out publicly, but at some point somebody's gonna get folks to roll up their sleeves, figure this out, and hash out a deal. The governor's a smart guy, he's a talented guy, and I have to agree. His leadership on getting this done or whatever he wants to get done makes it that much more likely to get done. So his support and leadership involved in helping us out will certainly help. That's not to say he hasn't been involved, but look, the governor can do a lot of things. He's got to roll up his sleeves and help us get done a budget that's going to deal with all kinds of different issues. This is one of those issues, and like other important issues, we believe he can play an important role. And that doesn't mean he hasn't played one. That's just saying that sometimes if you're the star player, doesn't matter if you've already hit 10 3-pointers in the game. In the fourth quarter, we need to hit one more.
Understood.
Well,
Representative Brown, closing remarks, please. Thank you.
I think that we need some action out of this. So for those on here, reach out, let your folks know, reach out to your local representatives, tell them to sign on to HB 2210. Whatever senators are not on SB 846, reach out to them. Reach out to leadership. Let them know. We want 2210 referred to. We need it moved over into Judiciary Committee. You know, we need help with this. We're not going to be able to get it done alone. We need the power of the people, the power of the industry, the power of everybody to get this thing done. This is not solely on us. This is going to be a team effort. So however you see fit, we need y'all to get in the game so we can get this thing done this year. That's
great. Thank you very much. Look, thanks to everyone that joined via Twitter and via Zoom. Thanks for joining us today. And particular thanks, of course, to our three speakers, Senator Sharif Street, Senator Daniel Laughlin, Representative Evan Brown. Everyone have a good day. And again, thanks to our three panelists for being available today. And thank you for all the work that you do.
No problem. Thank you.
Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
I know.